I am with my friend and colleague. We're taking a field trip to San Francisco today. I feel like this is how I have to travel now, is through these virtual Zoom meetings. This is Robert Sokol, who is based in the Bay Area. We know each other from the American Theater Critics Association, but tell people about your background. You are an arts journalist. You've been covering the theater there. I think I read on your bio since 1997.
Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about it. I actually conducted my first showbiz interview, my first sort of celebrity contact thing, when I was in college. My freshman year of college, Jason Miller, if you remember him, he played Father Karras in The Exorcist. So he was hiding out in this little town in Mansfield, Pennsylvania, and that's where I went to college. And he was there, and so I decided, with no prior experience, that I would go and interview Jason for the college newspaper, and I did it, and it actually came out quite well. And then I never did it again from 1970 something or other until 1997. And so that's how that happened. And it was the return to the field was born out of necessity. I was working in what I called the benefit circuit,
Mhm.
and we needed to promote some of the shows that we were putting on to raise money for AIDS. And magazines were willing, but they weren't willing to pay a writer to work on stories. And so I wound up interviewing our guest artists and writing articles to promote these events. And that just turned into one thing and another, and 20 years went by.
So, when did you fall in love with the theater?
I fell in love with movies first, actually. I was probably, let's see, 1967, that would have made me about 8 or 9. And so I became addicted to musicals because I saw Dr. Dolittle. Remember Dr. Dolittle? Rex
Rex
Harrison,
Harrison?
Anthony Newley, Samantha Eggar, uh, Richard Attenborough.
Mhm.
Uh, and that just, that was it. And from then on, it was an obsession with musicals. And very quickly from that, when I was, I guess now you would have called me a tween, but at the time I discovered musical theater through cast recordings. And so I would listen to everything from, West Side Story and Maine to like A Little Night Music. If you can imagine a 13-year-old being like laser focused on A Little Night Music and being able to sing all parts of Now, Soon, and Later. That was me. That was how I got hooked on theater.
Okay, at our next conference, I'm going to get you drunk and ask you to perform a little night music for me. Now you've given me a bucket list item to do.
You won't have to get me too drunk to do that, but you might have to liquor up the rest of the room in order to get them to stay.
I'm on it. I'm on it. So, and it's interesting because I also fell in love with musical theater through movies. My first movie musical was The Sound of Music at Radio City Music Hall. Um, but my first introduction to musical theater was the cast recording of Annie. I remember my aunt putting on that cast recording and just being enchanted by Andrea McCardle. I wanted to be Andrea McCardle. I wanted to be in it. Every teenage girl wanted to. We all wanted to be Annie at that time. Um,
Yeah, I sort of I say with no irony or shame that musicals really saved my life. I mean, I grew up as a gay kid in a small, inhospitable town in northeastern Pennsylvania, which ironically got memorialized by name in a song from the musical Tavarich, if you can imagine that. There is a song in Tavarich sung by Vivian Lee and Jean-Pierre Aumont that is called Wilkes PA, and that is where I grew up after I moved to the United States. And it was not a great place to be for a young queer kid trying to sort himself out. So cast recordings, musicals, soundtracks, they really became a place for me to escape where I was, and to be someplace that I could relate. Although why I related to, you know, talking animals and Swedish people, you know, singing about waltzes, I don't know, but I related. It was a way to get out of that. And, you know, if you live long enough, all sorts of things come full circle. And a couple of years ago, I was in New York for a week of, you know, mainlining Broadway shows and just catching up on things. And I went to this benefit because I worked on a lot of them over the years. And this was a benefit to raise money for I want to say the Episcopal Theater Fund or something like that. But among the many performers in this show included Carol Lawrence, the original Maria from West Side Story, and just lots of other folks, was a lady named Marnie Nixon, whose name I hope is familiar to you and to your audience. And Marnie, eventually very famously, was revealed to be the singing voice of Natalie Wood in West Side Story, of Deborah Carr in The King and I, of Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady, and other. She became the most famous of that whole genre of ghost singers. And there's a marvelous documentary about those, specifically those women, also some men, but mostly women who did that ghost singing. And so Marnie was in this benefit that I was attending, and I had never met her before. And another lady who show was Sarah Rice, who was the original Joanna in Sweeney Todd. And so Sarah and Marnie and I were all talking after the performance, and we all were heading uptown in the same general direction. So we shared a cab, and then we decided we were hungry. So at like 1 a.m, we went to this diner, and I'm sitting there like still absorbing, you know, that I'm with these two women who I've admired for so long. And at one point, Sarah excused herself to go to the ladies' room. And I'm sitting there with Marnie, and I just felt compelled to thank her, because all of the years of listening to her Maria and her Anna Leonowens and her Eliza Doolittle helped me get through so much. And I have to imagine that there were many people like me who relied on that. And so I felt really privileged to have that opportunity to thank her for her work and what it meant to me. And she seemed really genuinely touched by that. I don't kid myself that I'm terminally unique, but I also wasn't sure that she'd heard quite that before. I don't know.
Somebody asked on Facebook, Kim, who is in our Theater Critics Association, she wants to know what the title of Marnie's, the documentary of those ghost singers. Do you know the name?
It's, I don't know it off the top of my head.
We'll find it out, and I will post it in the link when I repost this video.
I want to say it was a BBC documentary, maybe. But yeah, we'll figure that out and get the word out.
We will get the word out, because people are looking for things to watch on television right now. We all have a lot of time on our hands. Anybody other than those two women that you've interviewed? I mean, you've interviewed, you have my bucket list of people that you've interviewed. Kayala Settle, being one of them. She's on my bucket list of people I'd like to interview. Anybody that you interviewed that you had listened to as a young person that you interviewed later and were a little starstruck?
Yes.
Other than those two?
Bernadette Peters, Shirley Jones, Rita Moreno, Chief Vera. Oh God, there are just so many folks. I mean, those are names, you know, that the leads of Broadway, of the theater and musical film world, you know, at the highest echelon. Angela Lansbury. I've actually had the opportunity to work with Angela Lansbury on a couple of occasions, and they're just all Carol Channing. You know, it's like Carol Channing. Yeah, no, just so many wonderful people, and I a lot of these connections came out of what I call the benefit circuit, which was basically the late 90s through about 2008, 2010 for me, working on AIDS benefit concerts, fundraisers. And I did that here in San Francisco and also in Los Angeles. And so, you know, we would bring together, you know, 15, 20, 30 performers, major names, and you know, all get together for a weekend, live in this intense little, we're putting on a show for one night only kind of thing. And then everybody went their separate ways, but, you know, you stay in touch, or you see them, you know, on the second or third time around. I mean, Leslie Uggams, Pamela Myers, Karen Morrow, the delightful Karen Morrow, Alice Ripley, Emily Skinner, Randy Graff, Eileen Graff, Nancy Dussault. I don't have any more room on my floor because I've dropped too many names.
You're going to have to write a book for us. Not a tell-all, but just kind of, you know, an autobiography or something of your career. You know, I think when we're in our little bubble of theater, so I'm in my little bubble here in North Carolina, and I have a pretty good grasp of what that theater community looks like. You are in, you know, what I would call a major metropolitan area. So on a good day, on a normal week, what does the Bay Area theater scene look like?
The Bay Area theater scene is phenomenal. It's we are one of the top 5 theater markets in the country. We have probably upwards of 300 theater and dance companies, and that's not even including cabarets and comedy clubs and the symphony and all of the classical music venues, which I'm not smart enough to be able to follow. It's just we're so blessed in terms of the arts here in immediately in San Francisco, but also in the 9-county Bay Area. And I, you know, I'm embarrassed to admit that when I first got here, I moved to San Francisco from Manhattan back in 1981. And I was a bit of a Broadway snob. I mean, I would immediately go to all of the, you know, the tours that came through town kind of thing. But, oh, well, if it wasn't from Broadway, then how could it possibly count? I was also kind of young and obnoxious then. Happily, I learned just how gloriously lucky we are here in the Bay Area. I can go to theater every night of the week and twice on Saturday and still not get to everything I want to see. There was a period of time when my husband and I were publishing a magazine. We published a magazine for 2 years, and it was called Bay Stages. It was kind of a Time Out San Francisco, list all the upcoming events and interviews and so on. And, you know, we not only wanted to make connections with the venues here in town, but we would also, you know, like stick a pin in Union Square, which is kind of center of San Francisco, and then drive a 90-minute circuit around San Francisco. So we might, you know, pick up a matinee in San Jose and then come back and see a 7 o'clock show or an 8 o'clock show in San Francisco, or, you know, come up the other side of the bay and pick up something in Hayward or in Contra Costa. You know, there was just so much to see. I think at the max, I clocked something like, I want to say 185 or 195 performances in 1 year.
Wow. That's a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah. So
Uh,
we're
so when you were looking at 195 or 100 plus performances in a year, and then literally overnight, everything shuts down. um, how has this pandemic affected the theater community there? Here, our theater communities and a bit of a few artists that I've interviewed have compared it to a grieving process. Is that what you're feeling out there?
um I don't know that I'm grieving. At first it was just shock. It
Mm-hmm.
was the Thursday, I don't remember what the actual day, I want to say it was like March 14th or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was like watching a car accident in slow motion. I just watched my email queue and this thing got canceled and that thing got canceled and this thing got canceled. And I started as a service to the community, keeping a list of things that had been postponed or that were on lockdown. But and then after by Friday afternoon the next day, I just stopped because it was everything. Everything was gone, and so it was like a body blow of just having all that just stop all of a sudden on a dime. Um, and people are scared, people are frustrated. We've settled into this sort of weird new normal that we all is as temporary as possible. But the reality is that we're going to be living with this for quite some time. Because even if you flipped on the switch tomorrow and said, okay, it's cured, we're done, let's all go back to our lives, it's going to take weeks for shows to regroup, for companies to regroup, for rehearsals, for engines to start up again. And realistically, that's probably not going to happen until the fall, if we're lucky. I mean, I really don't see, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but I really don't see anything happen before then. It just doesn't feel realistic.
Well, and here I know there's been some conversations about filling theaters to half capacity, or everyone's going to sit 5 seats away from each other. And realistically, from an economic standpoint, that doesn't really work. That model doesn't make sense for the theater industry.
It doesn't make sense for Broadway, and it doesn't make sense for a black box 99-seat theater in Raleigh, Durham, or in San Francisco. It doesn't make sense. Theater can't operate on that economic model.
Mm.
I mean, granted, there are times when the house is only half full, but that's not always by design.
Yeah, but that's not purposeful. That's not a purposeful thing. So when there is no theater, when there is no art, um, a, a friend of mine, Judy, she just posted, and she works with several theaters here. There's also the problem of the cast and crew needing to be in close physical proximity. We ask a lot of our performers and our crew members, and there's a question of safety. I think people, whether they're on the audience side of it or the performer side of it or the crew side of it, are scared right now, as much as we all want to get back to theater.
And that fear is legitimate. I mean, you can look at it ironically, or humorously, let's say. It's like when we were together in New York, I went to a musical that shall remain nameless, but the leading actor, who spent a lot of time at the apron, was like a projectile spitter. He sang and he just emoted, and he also like sent saliva out into the house, and so that's a health hazard. I mean, that joking aside, that's a literal health hazard the way things are right now.
Mm.
You know, I
I
think.
Oh, somebody just posted his worry. You know, we could like spend the entire the entire hour. This is why I told you that I think we're going to be going on more than an hour tonight. And you guys, I promise you, you want me to get to the cast recording side of this conversation because it's pretty fascinating. But Gregory wrote, his worry is the meet and greets. I don't know that we're going to have the stage door for a very long time.
No, the stage. I don't think the stage door is going to happen for a long time. Opening night parties. I mean, as I'm sure you know, reviewing theater. You know, I have colleagues who would say you shouldn't be doing this, but I like to go to opening night parties. I love to mix and mingle. I love to socialize. And you know, what do you do? I mean, theater people are emotional, emotive, empathetic people. So what do? You hug and you give each other kisses, and you know that. And it's those kinds of things. It's going to be a huge, just like shift of how we respond to things. The very last play I saw before everything started coming down, and we'd already started having rumbles about this and so on. It was during the intermission, I ran into a friend of mine in the lobby, and he started coming towards me to hug me. And normally I would be like all over a hug from this guy because he's gorgeous. But I backed off, and he gave me this look of like recognition, and then understanding, and then like, oh please. And I was like, no, not oh please. We have to rethink the way we approach these things, or don't approach them. You know, but not approaching is the new normal.
Yeah, and as I've written about this and reported on this since this started, there's so many layers to this story, from fight choreography to intimacy directing to, I mean, the layers and the effects, the ripple down effects of this in this industry, I think are going to be long lasting, well after everything opens up again, I think.
Yeah, and I've seen some articles, some writing that proposes that what we try to take out of this is a way to reimagine things in a positive direction. It's like we've had this thrust upon us.
Mm.
I use the all-encompassing we of people who work in the full spectrum of theater and the performing arts, whether as humble journalists or publishers or performers or writers or directors, designers. We've had this thrust on us, and so much. I listen to Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, his press briefings every now and again, and he has been pretty damn inspirational in terms of saying, okay, this is a terrible thing and nobody wanted this. Now that we got this, let's take this opportunity to come back better. Let's reimagine things. Let's build differently. Because contrary to Apple, there is ly on the end of that word. Don't just think different, you think differently. And that's the grammar nerd coming out. But we can, you know, reconsider, you know, the way that when we go back to doing things, we don't have to do them the way we always did them just because that's the way we always did them.
I agree. And that brings me to another question. As an arts journalist, you know, I'm going to speak for myself. I was trained old school. I wanted to see my work in print. I wanted to get the newsprint all over my fingers. It would thrill me when I could open up something and see a byline, whether it was my high school paper or college paper. I had an article in a magazine that was published a few years ago, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on a hard copy. Our industry as journalists has been changing anyway, as so many of our newspapers are not covering the arts anymore. The art sections are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Columns are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And a lot of us are
smaller and smaller.
Yeah, paychecks are getting smaller and smaller. And then a lot of us are turning to online platforms to publish our articles and reviews. I feel like this is a moment where our industry really has an opportunity to change the way we deliver arts journalism. So are we at that moment where we have to start figuring this thing out? Because it's not going to come back the way it was. A lot of our newspapers may not even be in business after this.
I think from an arts journalism perspective, we've been at this moment for quite some time. I don't think that the COVID-19 pandemic has had anything to do with that particular factor, other than perhaps forcing us to be even more creative and more resilient and more determined. And I think I think that perhaps what this moment can do is sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. And what I mean by that, and I'll probably get some hate for this, is that, you know, there are a lot of people who embrace the concept of arts journalism as a sort of lifestyle enhancer. It's like, hey, yeah, free tickets to shows and stuff, but who really don't see anything beyond that, don't see themselves as that the audience they're really serving is themselves. And so I think that particularly now that we're in a place of there are no free tickets, you know, there is no free ride. You know, the people who continue to look for ways to support the industry, invent new protocols, invent new platforms, new ways of approaching things, new ways of thinking about things, those are the people who will survive, and the others will just fall by the wayside.
Well, and I have seen that. We have quite a few online publications here in Raleigh, and they're not reporting on a whole lot. And I think because my background or my training was as a news journalist. I wasn't trained. I mean, there is no arts journalism training. So, you know, I went to school to be a news journalist, but I think because of that, I responded very quickly in an adrenaline rush to chase this story. And you will understand that as a journalist. I mean, this is a compelling story to chase. And so we started creating these videos right away. And the theater community responded in this really beautiful communal way. And I'm not seeing a lot of our other outlets. The theaters are creating virtual content, but I'm not seeing a lot of our news outlets create content. It's almost like, well, okay, we'll write about the Metropolitan Opera. Okay, we'll write about these things that are happening. Our theater community here, and I know yours there, is hurting, craving content right now, craving community. And I have certainly felt that as a journalist here in our community, the way that people have responded to these videos and the content we're producing. And I think it's an interesting moment.
Yeah, and I really applaud what you're doing, because you're keeping connections going between the supporters, the patrons of the arts in your region, and arts makers, and keeping that connection and that dialogue going. You're thinking outside the box of your region and talking to folks in New York and in London and here in San Francisco and so So you're expanding your vision on what what you can deliver to your audiences, and you're also giving folks just a chance to engage. I mean, part of the challenge in this weird time is just being able to communicate, to have dialogue, to have an exchange of ideas, to have your mind stretched and stimulated a bit. And it's like, okay, let's have a really intelligent discussion about this instead of just tuning in for an hour of the daily outrage on MSNBC.
Yes. Well, and I've got a hot secret for everybody, and I don't mean to blow our cover here as theater critics, but as theater critics, we love the theater. We cover the theater because we love the theater. And I love this community. I think they get that by now. They figured that out. And I know you feel the same way. And so I think when we face something like this, it's as much for me to connect. Like you said, you go to opening night parties. I want to reconnect with my friends. I'm missing my friends. I'm missing the community. So as my husband says, I'm just bringing the community to me every day through these videos. So, but it's a strange time. What do you think? Are as arts journalists, are we going to start covering live streams of theatrical events? Are we going to start covering? Does what we cover begin to change? Because it feels strange to watch something on TV or on the computer and write a review of it, or listen to a podcast of an audio drama and write a review.
And
is that part of the new normal?
Nobody better be reviewing this. That's all I can say.
Well, Bill Hirschman's on here, so I don't know. We may make some. Hi, Bill.
Your face right now, it's like, oh. So your question about reviewing live streams. I've actually seen, well, it depends on the context. A lot of the stuff that's being done right now is being done, just again to connect and to have some dialogue. It's like, I'll lose my mind if I don't do something. A lot of it is being done for fundraising. I mean, I will be throttled if I don't do a shout out to Seth Rudetsky and his Stars in the House series twice a day for the last month plus of just putting on a show every day and raising money for the Actors Fund and just making it incredibly entertaining, as only his husband James Wesley can. So there's that element of it. I've seen reviews of productions that have been streamed. In our region, we had about 3 or 4 things that were captured on video before they went dark. Theater Works had Pride and Prejudice, the world premiere musical. ACT had 2 plays that they managed to capture on video before they had to shut down. And fortunately, I was blessed to see both of those live, so I didn't have to tune into the streams. And Marin Theater Company had a world premiere play also that they were able to stream. So there was a little bit of that, and I saw subsequent reviews of that. I think depending on how long we stay in this mode, if theater makers start to create content specifically for streaming that isn't going to look like movies, isn't going to look like TV shows, it's going to look like theater, but just a slightly different form of theater, then and it's original. It's not something from their back catalog that they their archival videos or something like that a lot of companies are doing to raise money, so on. If they start creating original content for this platform until such time as we can have them creating on stage again, I think that opening that up for review is absolutely legitimate, and would, I think, would be welcomed by not only the makers, but certainly by our cohort of folks who want something to write about.
Yeah. Well, and it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. And on the other side of this pandemic, what stays with us. Some theater makers here have said that all of the delivery of all this virtual content makes theater more accessible to people in a way that maybe it hasn't been before. So it'll be interesting to see what lasts after this.
Yeah, there's the accepted wisdom is that if you make things available on the digital platform, that it somehow diminishes the live performance element, or it erodes audience. And I just don't believe that. You know, there are I think so many young theater fans are made because they stream something on YouTube, or they get hooked on something like that, and it's not, well, I've seen that, done that, I'm, you know, moving on. It's, oh my God, I want to see that on stage. I want to see that live. And sometimes I want to see it live 10, 15, 20 times, you know. Repeat business in certain sectors of theater among patrons is extraordinary. So I don't think that this is going to create a diminished appetite for live performance once it's all over. And I've always wanted it to be developed more. You know, the theater of the top in New York, Theater on Film and Tape. You know, they record just about every show now and have for several decades, but it's an archival thing. You have to have legitimate purpose to go there, either as a researcher or you're planning a production, or, you know, so it's not accessible. And, you know, I respect very much people's concerns about intellectual property and, you know, the original designer, the original choreographer, that, you know, and everybody also should be compensated. But I feel like there's something really lost when, you know, it's a limited run, it's not going to tour, and it's not made available in some other format. I mean, I would so much rather watch a single camera setup of, you know, the Virginia Woolf that now will not reopen with Laurie Metcalf and Rupert Everett, than any TV show.
Absolutely. I know one night I was up late, and I'll at one point I'll put some blooper reel in for all these videos, but there's been a lot of funny things behind the scenes, and so I was up late troubleshooting one of the videos, and it takes forever to upload something to YouTube. Forever. If you haven't done that. You probably have. Other people watching, if you haven't, takes forever. And while it was uploading and rendering and buffering and doing all the things it was doing, I watched Hugh Jackman in Oklahoma when they made that available, and it was delightful. It was just, I don't want to say mindless, brainless activity, but it was just a happy pill. It was the happy pill I needed at 2:00 in the morning.
If anyone is feeling, you know, a little theater desolate, and you know, absolutely, you know, the companies that are able to stream something that they have created, support them. And by that, I mean, it's almost overwhelm. There's almost too much content out there, because I'm plugged into a lot of those networks, and you know, the National Theater is like, if you're a Shakespeare nerd, you can absolutely overdose on what the National Theater is putting out. You know, I mean, certainly there, you know, there are things that have been around for a while. Andrew Lloyd Webber's
Yes.
stuff he has done, and there are services like Broadway HD and so on. But you know, if you're on a budget, go to YouTube. There is so much out there. It's astonishing, and even if it's just a little 5-minute clip of something, I personally find it, like you did, that middle of the night episode is just like invigorating to just get that, whether it's Donna McKechnie in Music in the Mirror, or you know, Cheetah Rivera doing Where You Are from Kiss of the Spider Woman. It just, you get those little snippets of things, and it's just absolutely delightful, and it's heart-filling.
Well, something else that's heart-filling to me is Broadway cast recordings, when I want to turn off all these streams. So this background behind you, I'm going to start with the background behind you. It is not a Zoom background. It is not some Zoom image of some library in some exotic location. This is your apartment. And what is in those card catalog boxes, Robert Sokol?
The precious. It's the precious. It's my media library.
It is a collection. It's an archive of cast recordings and.
Would you like Der Besuch der Alte Dame, which is the German version of The Visit, or we could go to I'm in the about before the Southern California production of Diana that moving to Broadway, there was Diana de Musical, which is a Dutch production that predated it by a couple of decades. I do actually have some English language recordings in here. I just am not finding right at the moment. But yes, this is my little world. This is the result of about, I want to say, 45 to 50 years worth of obsessive collecting, and obviously not all of it. There's stuff you can't see, which is the whole racks and racks of LPs and video and other stuff that's not here in the apartment. But this, and I'll just do this. I hope nobody has.
Please do this. People do not have any idea how large this is, so please.
Yeah, if anybody has vertigo, they might want to look away. The thing does go all the way to the floor. It goes all the way, 4th floor, ladies' lingerie, to the ceiling.
Full of soundtracks.
Well, no, it's I would say it's about 50% cast recordings, and then about 25% video, and about 25% vocals, which is a mix of everything from an entire drawer of Barbra Streisand to Garth Brooks, which is my husband's obsession, and everything in between, including your Lauren Kennedy.
Yes, Lauren Kennedy's in one of those drawers. So
get out, and I'm like, say.
So let us talk about, so Patty Murin, about, I don't know, a week ago, it seems like 100 years ago at this point, but she tweeted out something that, and she said on Twitter, sometimes I call Broadway cast recordings soundtracks, and it does change the fact that I'm listening to music, and that's important. So is there a difference between a soundtrack and a recording? Should we all be a cast recording snob?
Oh, there you are. You turned into Cher for a minute there, singing "Believe."
Oh no. So did you hear the question?
I think I'm intuiting the question, which is, do we call it a soundtrack or do we call it a cast recording?
Yes.
And there are actually some very funny memes circulating on the internet of like Batman smacking Robin in the head and saying, "It's a cast recording, damn it." So yeah, no, a soundtrack is something that is associated with filmed content. So soundtracks go with filmed content. It can be a television show, it can be a movie. A soundtrack does not necessarily have to have music in it. The dialogue of a film is part of its soundtrack. So that is a soundtrack. Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth sing on the cast recording of Wicked. So if you don't want to get smacked like Robin, then never ever call a cast recording a soundtrack.
Okay.
You can have a cast recording and a soundtrack of the same score, like Oklahoma or Carousel or whatever. And sometimes even the same performers on the cast recording and on the soundtrack. But they're two different things.
So let's talk about the history of the cast recording for a second. I read on Wikipedia, and therefore it must be true, that the cast recording industry, the cast recording as we know it, started across the pond in Britain. Is that true?
They're not as we know it.
Okay.
The cast recording as we know it really sort of came into being in 1943 with Oklahoma. There are people who will argue to push that back a few years, but when the average person thinks of a cast recording, or thinks of a soundtrack, which is really a cast recording, 43 Oklahoma. But there are lots of recordings that date back much further than that. There was a show called Florodora, which goes back, I think, to 1899, as recorded elements that are not true cast recording, but they are a grouping of songs from that particular recording. I always love Florodora because it's the line that Dot in Sunday in the Park with George, when she's talking in Act 2 about her grandmother was a Florodora girl at one point. Anyway, so in Britain, and I believe Florodora was a British musical, but throughout the 20s and 30s, recordings would occur both in the UK and in the US that were not truly cast recordings, because maybe they would have one star from the show, but not chorus or supporting performers. Maybe they would have other arrangements of the songs, not the original orchestrations as were heard in the theater. Maybe they would have, a piano accompaniment rather than 14 pieces in a pit, that kind of thing. So back to where I was before, Oklahoma is widely considered the first true cast recording because the leading performers who are on that recording were the ones who were on stage. The orchestra, the arrangements, the chorus of singers that backed up that show, they're all the same folks that appeared in the performance that are on the record, which was originally issued as a set of, I believe it was 4 78s, humongous hulking. If you've never seen a 78, they're very heavy. And the book was literally like that thick. It came in an album, literally an album, and it had that 1943 yellow Oklahoma cover, and then 4, or I think it was 4, 8 sides, sleeves with those heavy lacquer shellac discs that you would play with that huge scarifying needle. And that's kind of where the sound, the cast recording was born.
So from there, we now have, it's very interesting to me because when we look at a show like Be More Chill, Even Sing Street. Sing Street actually hasn't opened on Broadway yet, but they dropped their cast recording
Mhm.
yesterday or today. Um, the release and the timing of the cast recording now can really make or break a show. You were talking about young people falling in love with shows on social media or on YouTube. That's kind of where Be More Chill got its legs, and then wanting to see the show live. So, how has the cast recording evolved? And how has the cast recording turned into a marketing tool? Because when I was a kid, I don't remember the cast recordings really being a marketing tool as they are now.
I, I think they've always been a marketing tool. I, you know, Oklahoma, as going back to that point in history, a lot of people bought the recording of Oklahoma because they couldn't get tickets to see the show for whatever reason. And so it generated more and more interest. Like you said, had there been social media back in 1943, you would have been listening to Oklahoma and chatting it up with your friends. So it's always been a marketing tool. It usually was in the 40s, 50s, well, the 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s, you would have demos before to generate interest, or you would have pop covers of things to generate interest back in the days when the popular music was much more driven by Broadway, until rock and roll took over and everything changed again. Um, so I think I've gotten away from the question.
Well, how has it evolved as a marketing tool? I guess.
So now, cast recordings are, from the demo, you went into this period of time where you had a lot of concept recordings, and that became the tool to gauge interest and to see what would happen. Evita was a concept album before it was anything else. The Who's Tommy was a concept album, was an album before it was anything else. Jesus Christ Superstar, again, keep going back to Andrew Lloyd Webber, he was onto something. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. They were all, presented as concepts without productions behind them, and then those productions came along and came forward. So you went through a period of time where there were demos. Now it's become very common. You can also start to hear the backers auditions from that era. You can hear Sondheim and Hal Prince pitching Sweeney Todd to a backers audition, because those recordings have survived and have gone out into the world, and you can start hearing those things, and that's how they were promoted then. And so now albums are preceding productions in a lot of cases to build interest. Six was a huge album presence, huge streaming presence before it got on stage. It was all set to open when the lights went out. And Be More Chill, also like that. It became a cult phenomenon amongst the social media crowd, which gave it enough juice to get it produced on Broadway. And in some cases, like Be More Chill, there was the original album that was made from, I believe, a New Jersey cast. And then it got followed by a cast recording of the Broadway production. And there were also sort of supporting albums related to that. I can't remember the name of it right now. It's gone right out of my head. But there are other albums. George Lazarus and Joe Iconis have recorded other things related to the whole Be More Chill phenomenon. So yeah, it's You know, cast recordings have become a pre-marketing tool as much as they, you know, have become an after opening marketing tool.
Are we going back to the days, because Broadway shows are getting more and more expensive to produce? Are we going back to the era of the concept album with shows like Waitress? I feel like that may have started out as a concept album. You and I were talking earlier about The Wrong Man, which there's a concept album on Spotify people can listen to. Are we getting back to that as shows are getting more and more expensive to produce?
I I think that composers are looking for any way they can find to get their music heard. So, you know, there are demo songs now on hundreds of websites. You can go to any number of composers, and there will be very active catalogs of demo songs on their websites so that people can hear their music. You know, things are being released as, you know, not even necessarily in under the formal label of a concept album, but
Mhm.
just a collection of songs, a song cycle. You know, and fortunately um, there are publishers who are committed to getting that music out there to the world. You know, there's a lot of independent publishing that's going on, done by the creative artist, by the composer, by the songwriter. There are also some great labels who are very committed to that, like Broadway Records and Ghostlight Records,
Mhm.
who put out not only a whole bunch of true cast recordings, but also work with a lot of composers and singer-songwriters to get their music out there, to, you know, promote new talent that will be, you know, the Broadway composer of, you know, 5 years from now, maybe.
Mhm. Well, and I think I guess another question I have for you is, as we enter this digital age, this age of streaming and live performances, there's a whole lot of people right now in our community doing concerts. Um, and I wonder from the I love the concerts. Do not come after me, everyone in Facebook land. I'm enjoying the concerts. But the journalist in me kind of wonders about the copyright um, of these songs. I know just even on my podcast, I can't put, just because I own a cast recording doesn't mean I actually own the copyright to that cast recording. It is for my personal benefit. If I want to play a cast recording on my podcast, there's a lot of hoops I have to jump through. I've come to learn. So talk about the digital age and how cast recordings are changing in this age of digital media streaming.
Um, well, I mean, that concept just went like wong.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and it's a whole range of topics. I mean, you know, we could spend several years talking about intellectual property and fair use and what does that mean, and, you know, who gets paid and who has the rights to what, and, you know, what is contractually allowed versus what people do, and then the whole gray area of like people who go and record shows and bootlegs and all of that kind of stuff. So that's just a huge mishigas, to try and approach. On a more practical level, as you can see here, I have a great fondness for touch and feel media. I like when the little package comes in the mail and there's something for me to open and look at. And I spoke in the last week with two very dear people in the cast recording business, one of whom is seeing that go away and seeing it, with certain exceptions, really seeing it become just digital and streaming, and that the costs, there are so many costs already embedded in creating a cast recording, the musicians, the actors, or all of that, the arrangers, the studio time, the mixing, that all of those elements that have to go into it to then, and I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, so it's not just like, hey, let's all get together in a room and do this. So to lay on top of that another $10, $15, $20,000 for creating physical product, the pressing the discs, the printing the booklets, the packaging, and getting that all, it's a lot easier for the publishers to just go digital. It's like, you download this stream and we'll send you a PDF of a booklet, and boom, you're done. But the other fellow that I talked to, who doesn't quite see it that way, and is more closer to my heart, is that the physical memento of the experience, much like you hang on to your playbills, having the cast recording, even if it's no longer the glorious 12 by 12 gatefold LP thing with pages that you can turn, even the CD booklet, if it's well done, it has, it's tremendously valuable to enhancing your experience of the recording. And yes, you can have it all digitally, you can have a PDF booklet and so on, but sometimes you want to sit on the couch and look at it. You don't want to have to do it with an iPad or a laptop or a computer and so on. So I do think that probably within my lifetime, the physical media is going to go away, and that will make me sad. But but there are so many opportunities. There's so much content out there. There's so much music out there, that we're never going to run out of things to listen to.
That's true. Judy is saying she loves buying CDs from musicians at arts festivals. We have a really rich, probably even more so than our theater legacy here in North Carolina, we have a rich music legacy here in North Carolina. And she's wondering how that experience would translate digitally. I think it, on the one hand, I guess it makes the artists' music more accessible, and on the other hand, it loses that, what we talked about at the beginning, that personal contact of.
It's the tangible, the tangible connect. I mean, let's set aside the time we live in right now and go back or forward to the day where you could be at the stage door or be in the meet and greet line at a concert or a festival or a cabaret. The something tangible to take away from that. And even the fellow who said to me, that he really sees the physical media going away, he acknowledged that there are cases like an artist performing live in concert, having something to sign for the fan to take away. Does that become a poster then? Does that become something else? I mean, I really can't see it being terribly emotionally satisfying to have someone sign a credit card sized download certificate that you can then, no, that's not going to work.
Not the
but when we all come out of this, how is that going to change? It's the other part of my life is that my husband and I run a publishing company, and we publish playbills for about 30 theater companies here in the Bay Area. And people keep saying print is dead, print is dead, print is dead. But the reality is that playbills, we thought about it. We thought about it very carefully. And aside from our love of theater, it's like playbills are going to be with us for quite some time to come. And so it made sense for the remainder of our professional lives to focus on that and see that as not a dead media. I know Bill Hirschman is out there, as he likes to say, dead tree legacy business. Uh, but that will continue because and there was a piece in the New York Times, God, sometime within the last year about people wanting their playbills, people being very vehement about wanting their playbills. Don't cheat me out of that. And theater companies don't want, um, you know, their patrons on their phones trying to see, how many songs left in the first act before I can go to the bathroom. It's like, no, you don't want that. You don't want to engage in the digital in that sense. So there are a lot of reasons. I've gone way around the bend on this. I apologize, but there are a lot of reasons why physical media, whether it's the playbill, the CD, the poster, the whatever, are still going to be very, very important to people, and we're still going to be producing those things.
Do you have a favorite cast recording?
uh,
Or are these like your children? No, these children, your children behind you.
you don't pick. And I'm always excited to see what new things are going to be coming my way. I mean, I literally have. I was thinking about it for show and tell as I'm sitting here. The kinds of things that have come in the mail in the last couple of weeks/month that are waiting to be listened to. So we've got Platinum Girls, which is a new musical I know absolutely nothing about, but I'm looking forward to that. Emoji Land. I don't know. Have you listened to Emoji Land yet?
I haven't listened to it yet, but they're up for a Drama Desk Award or two.
And I find these really weird things on eBay where I spend way too much time. Saucy Jack and the Space Vixens. I'm like alternately terrified and excited. I'm excited and scared. Little Red. Um, this which got a lot of chat. It's losing my mind. A disco fever dream of Sondheim. This was put out by Broadway Records. Van Deen, delightful man. I absolutely adore him, and I love what his company does. And this is a lot of fun. I'll say here, because I said it to him on the phone, it's like almost all works. There are a few songs that, the meter just isn't right for disco, but it's a fun listen and I enjoyed it. Celebration, and this is another wonderful thing, is that the people like Ken Bloom and Harbinger Records, who I'm trying to get the shine off of this, there we go, they really respect the canon and the historical pieces. And so this Schmidt and Jones musical, which didn't have a long life on Broadway, but it has a score really worth listening to, they've put this out again and done some really good research on it and engaged with the composer who's still with us, to get this out to the world again. So there's a lot of stuff that keeps coming. I just, what else have I got here? Weird Things. Pinocchio, the musical, by a pop group, by an Italian pop group. This is all in Italian. I have no idea what I'm going to be listening to. By a group called Pooh. That's their name. And this, I will have you know, this is a very rare CD, very hard to find. If you go and look it up on Amazon, it's there for like $250. I did not spend $250 on it, but that's what comes from spending way too much time on eBay. Greece, you want to hear Greece? It's in Estonian, but it's Greece. And then weirdness that just comes my way. This, you can't quite make that out, but it's called Cinderella and Her Four Knights. It's a K-pop television series, musical television series. And so I'm going to be very fascinated to see what it's all about.
Amazing.
So I have no favorite children. I embrace them all.
Is there a particular show that doesn't have a cast recording or an original cast recording that you feel should have one?
Huh. That's a really good question. There are there are shows that have been partially recreated. Um, and so, yeah, I can't come up with something off the top of my head that, I mean, there are notorious flops that you kind of sort of wish there was a cast recording of, like Carrie, the original production of Carrie, or um, but you know, there are enough videos, archival videos that have gotten into circulation that if you really want to hear the original cast of Carrie performing a few numbers, you can find it. Again, go to YouTube. You'll find all sorts of amazing things on YouTube.
So there's a really funny photoshopped image that Broadway World is circulating right now. It's a picture of Bill Clinton with a different cast recording in his hand. Every day they're putting this out. So
Really?
I'm going to send it to you. I can't believe you haven't seen this. um,
I've been on sensory overload from all the stuff that the internet has been pushing my way. It's like, I'm not working right now, but I have no time.
You know, there's no theater right now, but I have never been busier, so I feel you. I do. But if you could put a cast recording in Bill Clinton's hand, and I'm going to send you this image, which one would it be?
Well, Clinton the musical would be too obvious.
That would be pretty funny, though.
What would I put in Bill Clinton's hand? Hmm. 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 I'm at a loss there. I want to say something flippant and politically incorrect, like Mean Girls.
That would be a good one. That would be a good one. Very fun. Well, I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. I'm so glad you got to share your passion for Broadway cast recordings. I love them. I think, you know, I share these Spotify playlists with folks as I do these interviews because they give me joy in a time that doesn't feel very joyous. So
Yeah,
I share your passion for the cast recording.
yeah,
Um,
it's a nice way to, like I said, way back at the beginning, you know, I was not in a happy place, but I could listen to a cast recording and it would take me to a happy place.
I I'm with you on that. I feel that too. So thank you for sharing your passion and your knowledge and your time with us. I've enjoyed my virtual field trip to San Francisco. I hope to take a real field trip to San Francisco and see you one of these days when we're done with all this craziness, or at the very least, see you in New York for our conference in November. Hopefully that'll happen.
We'll see each other in New York, and for sure, find your way to San Francisco when you can, and I will happily share with you the riches of the Bay Area theater scene.
Oh, I would love that. Let's just get back to theater. That's what I want right now more than anything.